Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
My life changed dramatically when I was 12. That's when my baby brother was born, with severe disabilities. Not the kind where someone can still enjoy life with some extra help, but the type where he needs constant care and can barely respond to the world around him. It was heart-wrenching watching my parents struggle to care for him, and it completely transformed our family dynamic. When I was 14, we finally got genetic testing done. That's when we discovered I carried the same rare chromosomal anomaly that had affected my brother. The doctors explained that if I ever had children, they would almost certainly face the same severe conditions. It was devastating news for a teenager to process, but I made peace with my decision not to have children. Better to know early, I thought, than to find out later. Fast forward to when I was 16, standing at the bus stop after school one day. There were several of us students there, along with this new teacher who had just graduated from college. She was trying way too hard to be the cool young teacher and kept forcing these overly casual conversations with us. We were all just making small talk to pass the time when somehow the topic turned to babies and future families. I immediately took a step back from the group, not wanting to participate. My close friends knew my situation and understood why I stayed quiet during these conversations. But this teacher noticed my withdrawal and wouldn't let it go. She asked me about my thoughts on having babies in my future, her voice dripping with that fake friendly tone teachers sometimes use. I gave her a quick, dismissive answer, telling her there wouldn't be any babies in my future. I tried to keep it brief, hoping she'd drop it. My friends shifted uncomfortably, knowing this was sensitive territory. The teacher let out one of those condescending laughs and told me I'd change my mind eventually. The way she said it was this smug, knowing smirk, like she had some special insight into my life, made my blood boil. She had that tone adults use when they think they know better than teenagers about everything. I snapped back at her, telling her that I wouldn't change my mind because I couldn't have healthy children. The bus stop went dead silent. You could have heard a leaf fall. The teacher stammered in shock, barely able to get her words out. She looked shocked, but instead of backing off, she just stared at me expectantly, waiting for an explanation she had no right to demand. Something in me snapped. If she wanted to know so badly, fine. I laid it all out for her. I explained about my genetic condition, about the chromosomal anomaly I carried, and how any children I might have would likely face severe disabilities. I told her about the kind of care they'd need their entire lives, how they'd barely be able to interact with the world, just like my brother. I made it clear that this wasn't about changing my mind. I'd made my choice. The color drained from her face. She opened and closed her mouth like a fish. No clever response coming out. The other students looked at their shoes, their phones, anywhere but at us. Suddenly, the teacher was very interested in checking the bus schedule on her phone. Those 5 minutes waiting for my bus felt like forever, but it was worth it to see her squirm. She never tried to force conversation with me again for the rest of the year. In fact, she could barely look me in the eye during class. She transferred to a different school the next year. Apparently, being the cool young teacher wasn't working out so well for her. I heard later from other students that she completely changed how she approached personal conversations with students. I work crazy hours, and my mornings are always rushed. It's a miracle if I manage to grab breakfast. That day, I was heading to a little bakery near my place. They make the fluffiest muffins and a killer coffee, the kind of stuff that gets you through a long day. I had overslept a little, so I wasn't exactly in the best mood. But hey, coffee and muffins, worth it. When I walk in, everything seems pretty normal. It's a small shop, cozy, and the staff are always cheerful despite dealing with grumpy people like me before their first cup of coffee. There were only a few customers around, so I figured I'd be in and out quickly. And then I heard it. This shrill, almost screeching voice from the counter. Someone was yelling about how unacceptable it was to be insulted like that. I look over, and there she is, Karen in all her glory. Middle-aged, classic Karen haircut, and a face twisted in righteous fury. She's holding a small cupcake in her hand, like it's a grenade about to go off. She was accusing the cashier of treating her like a charity case, demanding to know why anyone would give her something for free. The poor cashier, who looked like this might be her first job, was trying to explain that it was a promotion and that the cupcake was complimentary. Karen, however, wasn't having it. She insisted she didn't ask for pity and demanded they take the cupcake back, claiming she didn't need any free handouts. At this point, the other customers were starting to notice. Some were pretending not to listen, others were outright staring. I mean, how could you not? It was like watching a train wreck. Karen kept going, her voice growing louder as she declared that she wanted to speak to the manager. She said it was the most insulting thing that had ever happened to her. I had my phone in my pocket and, well, instincts kicked in. I pulled it out and started recording. I wasn't trying to be a hero or anything, but this was the kind of meltdown that people wouldn't believe unless they saw it. She must have caught the movement because she turned her laser eyes on me. She demanded to know if I was recording her and accused me of invading her privacy. Then she told me to delete it immediately. I pointed out that she was in a public place and I was allowed to record. That's when she really lost it. She stormed past the counter and got right in my face. She shouted about how I had humiliated her and threatened that I would regret it. Then she turned and stormed out the door, yelling at someone outside. I was still holding my phone, unsure if she was bluffing or if I should keep recording. That's when her husband, or some poor guy she dragged along, came in. He's got this big dog with him, a German Shepherd. The dog looked confused, probably wondering why he was suddenly dragged into this drama. Karen barked an order for the dog to get me and even shoved the dog in my direction. The dog barked a few times, but it was obvious he wasn't aggressive. He just stood there looking at me like he didn't understand what was expected of him. I backed up a bit, keeping my phone pointed at her. I questioned her, asking if she was seriously using her dog to threaten me. She yelled back that the dog would tear me apart and that I would learn to respect her. By now, the staff had enough. One of them, a guy who looked like the manager, stepped in and told her she needed to leave. He told her that the police had already been called. Karen, unfazed, declared that she would tell the police how the staff had mistreated her and tried to humiliate her in front of everyone. She grabbed her husband and dragged him and the dog out of the store, still yelling. I kept recording because I had a feeling she wasn't done yet. Sure enough, she was pacing in the parking lot screaming about lawsuits and defamation while her husband stood there looking like he wanted to disappear. About 5 minutes later, the police showed up. 2 officers stepped out and walked toward the store. Karen immediately ran up to them, all dramatic, pointing at me. She claimed I was harassing her, recording her without her permission, and even threatening her dog. The officers came over to me and I explained everything. I showed them the video on my phone which captured her meltdown and the moment she tried to sick her dog on me. They watched it, then looked at each other before walking over to Karen. They told her they needed to have a word with her. Karen assumed it was about me and said I was the one who should be arrested. The officers clarified that they were addressing her behavior, explaining that what she had done was considered harassment and could be seen as a threat. Karen, of course, argued that she was a victim and that it was ridiculous she was being questioned. The officers weren't having it. They asked her to calm down and step to the side while they talked to the manager and other witnesses. Meanwhile, her husband was awkwardly trying to wrangle the dog back into their car. Eventually, the officers returned to Karen and told her that based on the evidence and witness statements, they would have to detain her. Karen protested loudly, yelling that they couldn't do this and threatening to sue everyone involved. She continued screaming as they cuffed her and walked her to the patrol car. Her husband just stood there, not saying a word, probably wishing he had stayed home that morning. The dog, poor thing, wagged his tail, happy to be away from all the shouting. The officers came back to me to thank me for the footage and assured me that Karen would be charged for her behavior. The staff also thanked me, saying she had been a nightmare for months, but never crossed the line quite like this before. Honestly, who loses their mind over a free cupcake? Some people just can't handle kindness, I guess. Crazy Karens, man. They never disappoint. I have been working in the restaurant industry for about 5 years now, starting right after high school. My parents weren't exactly thrilled when I decided to skip college, but I had a plan. I wanted to learn the business from the ground up, hoping to open my own place someday. That's why I always volunteer for the opening shifts. They're the best time to learn about prep work, inventory management, and all the behind-the-scenes stuff that makes a restaurant tick. Last Tuesday started like any other opening shift. I arrived at 6:30 a.m. to get everything ready for our 8 a.m. opening. The morning routine is almost therapeutic for me. Checking the prep lists, firing up the grills, making sure everything is spotless and ready to go. I was in the middle of counting the register when I heard aggressive knocking on our front door at 7:50 a.m. Looking up, I saw this guy in an expensive-looking suit, probably in his 40s, tapping his watch and pointing at the door. I walked over and cracked it open slightly. I politely told him that we weren't open for another 10 minutes. He insisted that he just needed to place an order. I repeated that we weren't open for another 10 minutes and explained that our systems weren't even fully up yet. He spoke to me in a condescending tone, saying he didn't think I understood and that it would only take 2 minutes. He had that condescending tone that some customers use when they think they're somehow above the rules. After dealing with entitled customers for years, I've learned to keep my cool, but this guy was really pushing it. Still, I thought maybe he wanted to place a pickup order for later in the day, which we sometimes do. I decided to compromise and told him I could take his pickup order for later that day. I asked what he would like to order. He rattled off his order, a complex breakfast combo with about 5 modifications. I typed everything into the system, mentally rolling my eyes at each extra crispy and on-the-side request. When I asked him about his preferred pickup time, he gave me a look like I was speaking an alien language and said he wanted it as soon as it was ready. I explained that the food would be ready in about 15 to 20 minutes. His face turned red. He exploded, demanding to know why it would take so long. When I reminded him yet again that we weren't open for another 10 minutes, he lost it completely. He declared that the situation was ridiculous, announced that he was an executive with meetings to attend, and demanded that I cancel his order because he couldn't wait that long. I cheerfully agreed and wished him a nice day. What happened next was something straight out of a cartoon. This grown man, in his probably $1,000 suit, literally stomped out of the restaurant. Each step was like a mini tantrum, his expensive shoes slapping against the floor so hard I thought he might break the tiles. When he was having his little stomping session, he didn't notice our district manager pulling into the parking lot. I watched through the window as he stormed right past her, nearly knocking her coffee out of her hand. When she came in, she asked if everything was okay. I explained that we just had a customer who was upset about us not opening early for him. I told her the whole story, and she laughed, saying she'd seen him throwing his fit on his way out. But then she got serious and mentioned that she recognized him. She explained that he worked in the office building across the street and that they were actually one of our regular corporate catering clients. The next day, we got a call from his office's administrative assistant trying to place their usual large catering order for an upcoming meeting. Our district manager personally took that call and politely explained that due to a recent unfortunate interaction, we would need to revise their corporate account terms. Their new terms required 48-hour advance notice for all orders and full prepayment. A week later, I saw him in line during actual business hours. He wouldn't make eye contact with me, but I made sure to give him my biggest, brightest smile when I took his order. And yes, he had to wait the full 15 minutes for his food, just like everybody else. I'd like to share something that happened to me yesterday while Christmas shopping. For context, I'm a high school teacher, and after a long week of grading final exams before winter break, I decided to get my holiday shopping done. My family has this tradition where we exchange bottles of fine spirits and wines during our Christmas gathering. It started with my grandfather, who was a wine connoisseur, and even though he's no longer with us, we keep the tradition alive. I had just finished my last day of classes before the break, and still wearing my Philadelphia Flyers hoodie and the Santa hat my students had given me, they know I'm a huge hockey fan, I headed to Total Wine & More in one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in our area. I used to work at a cafe in this town during my high school years, so I'm quite familiar with how some of the locals can be, let's just say, rather demanding. Now, if you've ever been to Total Wine & More, you know their employees dress impeccably. White button-down shirts, pressed black pants, and polished dress shoes. They take their wine expertise seriously, and their appearance reflects that. Meanwhile, there I was in my bright orange hoodie, jeans, and this fluffy Santa hat, looking about as unemployee-like as humanly possible. I knew exactly what I needed. A specific bottle of whiskey my brother had been hinting at for months, and a nice Cabernet for my sister-in-law. I was heading straight to the whiskey aisle when this woman, probably in her mid-50s, wearing what looked like a fancy outfit worth more than my monthly salary, suddenly emerged from one of the aisles. She asked if I worked there. I kept walking, assuming she was talking to someone else. She repeated her question, a bit louder this time, but I still kept walking because surely she couldn't be talking to me. She then practically shouted the question a third time. At this point, she actually stuck her arm out to stop me, like a crossing guard halting traffic. I nearly walked right into her outstretched arm. She then asked one final time if I worked there, emphasizing each word as if I was hard of hearing. I couldn't help it. I started laughing. I looked down at my casual outfit, then at a nearby employee in their pristine uniform, and back at my bright orange hoodie. I asked her if she really thought I worked there, barely containing my amusement. She spluttered out that I was wearing a hat, as if that somehow proved I was an employee. I looked around the store, making an exaggerated show of it, still chuckling. I pointed out that yes, I was wearing a Santa hat in December, and I was literally the only person in the entire store wearing any kind of hat. I asked her how that could possibly make me an employee when all the actual employees were wearing matching uniforms. She got even more flustered and told me I didn't have to be so rude about it. I responded that she didn't have to stop random shoppers by physically blocking their path. Yet here we were. At this point, one of the actual employees, who had witnessed the whole thing, walked over and asked if everything was all right. The woman immediately complained that I had been incredibly rude to her when she had simply asked for help. I quickly pointed out that she had repeatedly yelled at me and tried to physically stop me while I was shopping. The employee apologized to me for the inconvenience and offered to help the woman find whatever she was looking for. She became even more indignant and demanded to speak to a manager about the situation. The employee told her that they had security cameras throughout the store, and physically stopping other customers was something they took very seriously. He then asked if she still wanted to speak with the manager. The woman's face went from red to white faster than a traffic light. She muttered something under her breath and practically power-walked to the exit, leaving behind her shopping basket full of wine bottles. The employee and I shared a knowing look and a laugh. He helped me find the whiskey I was looking for and even recommended a better Cabernet than the one I had in mind. I ended up having a great conversation with him about wines and holiday traditions, and he gave me some excellent suggestions for future family gatherings. When I was checking out, I saw the same woman in the parking lot through the store's windows, apparently arguing with a parking enforcement officer about something. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.